we might as well start because Dave will have to bounce. So, can I give you guys an impression at the beginning?
Go for it. Who are we going to get?
You can pick. Do you want me to be Jeffrey Verdi Schofield, Mike Israetel, or Omar Isuf?
I think we should go with Omar. You've been practicing those.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a little bit early for me. I woke up a bit late, but although you guys woke up earlier.
Isn't it like 2:00 in the afternoon?
No, I mean, so I've been up for a few hours, but like I'm a very slow waker on the weekends. So yeah. Okay. So what's cracking, guys? Today we have a fantastic podcast episode with Brian, not to be mistaken with Brain. Although he does have a brain, he is the truest muscle brain in the group, and not in a bad way, because his brain is all organ, not muscle, because he can help individuals to get jacked. And then we have Dave, the dentist of the industry, and he is the kind of dentist that is not boring, doesn't wear glasses, and is beautiful. My testosterone levels just spiked by 1,000 points just by looking at him. Dave, my man, back to you. What's cracking, guys? How are you?
Happy to be here.
That was not very good.
The way you laid that out, Omar, I mean, you've just set the table so perfectly for this discussion that we're about to have, you know?
Yeah.
I was thinking we our like nickname in our group is the Cast Boys. And given our past podcast, I think we should be called like the Hat Boys, because we're like, we would be 3 for 3. I'm missing mine today, but Brian's got 2. So this way we're covered.
Yeah, it's super cold here, man. We were at like 85 degrees and sunny 2 days ago, and then we got 6 inches of snow, and now it's like 32.
Oh, wow.
Oh. Yeah, when you guys are speaking in Fahrenheit, it's always Chinese to me.
Yeah, right.
It's like we can speak kilos and pounds, but not Fahrenheit and Celsius.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So I have a couple of topics that I wrote down for myself that I want to get into. Do you guys have anything specific that you will want to get off of your chest? Because then I will write it down here quickly so that we don't skip over it.
No, we can start and see what we get to. I mean, I have things in general to talk about, but let's start with what you have.
Yeah, just 2 quick ones. First of all, Dave, you actually had 2 really cool podcast episodes in the last 2 weeks. So I just want to touch on those. The first one was with Steve Hall. That was really awesome that you guys went over the coaching experience you had together, and Steve was comfortable doing that. And I think he handled it really well. It was really insightful. Did you have any more interactions with Pascal since then on the little, not miscommunication, but yeah.
No, we haven't chatted. I mean, maybe I made a comment or something on his Instagram picture unrelated, but nothing regarding that. But yeah, I thought it was a good talk. I thought at the end we agreed on what we saw. And even with Eric, it was like we talked about it a little bit. And it's like, yeah, nothing necessarily wrong with the coaching. Just at this point, what are you going to see in 6 months? Or like I said, I mean, really, I don't know what you'd see over. You almost have to guess that something's happening unless you're competing. And Brian Whitaker was always a good example of that. And I've mentioned this in the podcast before, but I remember showing 2 different pictures. He has it up. And this was 10 years ago. And my mom was in the room and I was showing her the pictures, and she literally didn't believe that it wasn't the same picture. She was like, David, that's the same picture. And I was like, no, see, there's there's little veins a little bit more, and nobody's going to question Brian Whitaker's dedication. So I just think at that point, if you're saying natty, nothing to do.
Yeah, it's and just for people that didn't see it. So Dave, you had the review video basically, or just not so much a review, more so just outlining your thoughts on how this past 6 months went, so that you did coaching with Steve and then you reflected on that. And Pascal, who is the colleague at the Revive team of Steve, said that, well, but how much visual progress can you really expect after 6 months at your training age? And you had a bit of a back and forth because you weren't really expecting visual changes necessarily, but just something like at least another few reps on a lift that you've been doing for a long time or something like that.
Something measurable.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, I usually fight against people who push on pictures all the time. I mean, this is like a frequent topic of discussion. Like to me, it's like pictures are just so easily not even manipulated like purposefully. Just you change the smallest thing, and it's like wow, like look at this progress, or wow, I've gotten so much worse. I mean, it's just I don't want to say pictures are useless because they're definitely not useless, but I find them much more useful when dieting or over like multiple off seasons. But from one to the next at our level, I mean, it's very hard to see anything.
Yeah. Um, Look, one thing I will say is that in the other podcast episode that you did with Eric, you touched on your calves. Again, so you've been training one for 2 years, the other one you haven't trained at all, right? So that this is
correct. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I trained them both for 15 years or whatever it was, but they haven't grown since I was 17 years old at 170 pounds and only like a few years into it, which honestly even surprises me. Like that's kind of shocking that I could have put on like I do think with a lot of muscle groups it's just proportional to weight and whatnot. But the fact that they actually have not grown in absolute size, putting on another 20 pounds of muscle is kind of shocking. And to literally not train it at all, like that even surprises me.
Yeah. Brian, do you have anything that resembles that level of stubbornness on your body?
Oh man, that's a good question. I mean, we've all kind of torn apart my hamstrings in our little DM group many a time. I think Abel's comment was something along the lines of like, your torso is an 8% body fat, your quads are like 10 to 12, and your hamstrings are 22. So, I don't think that's accurate, but it does bring the point that I do carry a lot of fat on my hamstrings, and because of that, I don't actually know like what's under there. I've never in my life been lean enough to actually see hamstring definition in that way. So like even in 2015, I cut down to do a men's physique show, and granted it was men's physique. So like, who cared about legs anyway? I probably didn't even train them that hard, but I had nothing on the hamstrings at that point. And then last year, my most recent diet was 182, and it was the same deal. Like I took pictures from behind with like the sun shining on me, and it was still just like this flat thing on the back of my leg. So I mean, maybe like I would say, if anything, like there's reason to believe my hamstrings are quite stubborn. I hip hinge, I think, decent loads and leg curl, with quality technique and stuff like that. So for me, that's definitely like what I would call the problem area.
Yeah. I'm happy to report that it looks like my calves finally shrunk a bit after not training them for like over 2 years. Because I actually thought that like, okay, it's like no matter what I do, they are just there. And I would say they look to be the same size, but I measured them not long ago, and it was almost like 2 centimeters that they shrank.
Really?
Yeah, I was actually surprised.
That's quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a bit. But I would say that my arms actually might be like what the calves are for Dave. That like it actually seems like, man, like just nothing seems to be happening. And like this winter, I was pretty excited that because like I went up, like I got a bit heavier, and I was training my arms a lot more with isolation stuff than I had done so before. And like, like when you get heavier, you have just, more intramuscular fat, more glycogen, and also, like actually, so this is really funny. I had a day when they measured 17 inches.
Wow.
No, no kidding. And I was even embarrassed, like, man, maybe I've actually somehow been measuring them wrong all along, and I'm a 17-inch arm kind of guy. And then it like, it turned out that I just got a bit fatter, and I just had some crazy water retention, and it showed up.
How much did you weigh when that happened though?
So I was weighing around like 90 kilos, a bit over.
Oh, that's
pretty big.
Yeah. So I'm thinking like for me at this point, again, it's just proportional to weight. So if I was, I mean, that is good, dude. I mean, at 200 pounds, that's 198. When I'm at 200 pounds, they're maybe like 16 3/4. So I think our arms, because that actually is really surprising to me, because before you were always saying your arms are like what, 15 1/2? Like there was a pretty big difference between us.
But they are again.
Okay.
That was like a 2-day experience.
That's weird. And what do your calves measure before you losing the 2 centimeters and now?
So they were like 38 centimeters, so like 15, maybe like, so it was like my arms basically, like 15 inches generally, and 16 if I got a bit fatter. And then now it was like 36 or so. So like 14 inches, a bit over maybe.
Yeah. Something that I think is really interesting with like we always talk about, like, oh, like there's the insertion of the muscle and all this stuff, but also just how much it's all dependent on other things. So like one thing I've noticed, like, so your calves, that means they got down to like 14 1/4, which is really surprising, because like you've sent us videos and they still look like good calves. Like that's a pretty small measurement. Like mine can look like sticks at 15 inches, right? But we talked about how much longer my legs are than yours.
Yeah.
But I realized it's not even just that. It's also like I've seen some of these like skinny guys, like maybe like skinny, lean basketball player. And if I just looked at their calf muscle, it's like that objectively is thin. But on their entire frame, it doesn't jump out to me as like, oh, this person has really skinny calves. They just kind of look generally athletic. And I think while that is insertion related, it also has to do with like I have wide, unaesthetic hips, and I know like Steve Hall kind of has that same issue. And I think that going down into small calves looks significantly worse than you can see some guys with like these narrow waists and hips. And in that case, it kind of falls in line. You know what I mean? So it's all like how it flows together.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but like honestly, the arms are kind of shocking to me, because they are not like with the calves. I think it's more commonly known that that's a very genetically like strongly determined body part or muscle group, and like a lot more people are talking about the stubborn calves. With the arms, it's like, well, I mean, it's not so much, of course, like there's a limit for everybody, but people are able to grow it to like 16 inches or so. I actually thought that like if I really dedicate myself to it, I could bring it up to that. I mean, maybe not now, like within like one like winter bulk, but still like something at least. If anything, actually, I think they're smaller. They somehow look less impressive than they usually are. Although this one looks pretty okay.
Pretty solid. It's pretty
good.
Looks good to me.
Yeah. Okay. So this was better now than I expected, but yeah, absolutely nothing. Not even like just absolutely nothing. So that's kind of sad. But anyways, go ahead.
What do you guys think? So I brought this up a while ago, but Nunez and I have kind of been talking about the idea of like increased vascularity at a given body weight, and like even if that doesn't necessarily correlate to bigger measurements or anything, or maybe even different caliper readings, but you are more veiny at 182 than you were 2 years ago at 182 type thing. And that being like, at least at, a super high level, something to look at and be like, wow, there's at least improvement happening here,
You want to go first, Abel?
Yeah, like I think there is something to that. I wasn't actually thinking of the veininess necessarily, but maybe there's something to that, like muscle maturity, or I don't know what to call it, because with my arms, for example, like even though they measure the same, like they do look more muscular than they did. Like, let's say, like there's a, in 2019, we were at this expo in Germany, and there's a picture of me where you can see my arms pretty well. Maybe I will even put it up on the screen. And if you look at my arms then and now, they are actually the same size. I can promise you that, but it does look as if it's more muscular now. So it's so yeah, and I don't know what happened, but it just looks more defined, more, I don't know, and just more beefy. So I don't know what does that, honestly, or what grew, if the actual size of it didn't grow, but something happens. So
I've definitely seen people look better with the same measurements, but I still feel like it's weird. I mean, obviously composition is such a huge aspect of it, right? Like you can have 17-inch arms that look like crap. But if we're like just talking about vascularity, I mean, it's hard because it's so dependent on so many things, right? I mean, I don't get vascular really at all unless I'm like really lean. And I've seen fat guys with, I mean, not fat, but like 20+% body fat guys with like crazy calf and forearm vascularity. And so they just always have that and it always looks really good. So I don't know. I guess I just haven't personally experienced it where I'm not leaner by calipers or waistline or something like that, but am showing more veins unless I took like a vasodilator or something like that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, heat obviously is a huge factor in that too, right? So like we have this steam shower in my house and like I do it in the mornings and sometimes I get out of the steam shower and I'm just like, whoa, what has happened to my quad right now when usually there's like not a single vein in the whole thing. But I guess the reason I brought up that anecdote anyways was so as I'm going through this diet, I just passed into like I'm consistently into the like mid to high 180s right now, like 186, 187 type range. And in past years, it wouldn't be until I got into the low 180s that I would see like a cross bicep vein as I'm just like walking around daily life, playing with my kids, like outside, whatever. But this time I'm seeing that like 5 pounds heavier. And so I thought that like, no, my arms aren't bigger. No, I don't think I gained 5 pounds of muscle. Like none of that is true, but it's a cool thing to be able to be like, there might be something happening here that I'm 5 pounds heavier now. And I'm having this vein that I didn't have until 5 weeks later in the diet in the past. So just something.
But what would that even indicate? Like, obviously, as you said, you didn't put on 5 pounds of muscle. So like, what would that
That's what I don't know. I mean, I guess in assumption, it's that I'm a little bit leaner, but like, no, I'm not 5 pounds leaner than I was last year. So no, I don't know what the answer is. I'm thinking like muscle maturity is a piece. I think that there's probably something to getting older and being more veiny, and that's why I was going to say
he could just be aging.
Like, no, because like that's certainly true. I mean, as I've gotten older, veins have just come to the surface more, unlike other areas of my body too that I don't even really like train, so it could just be that factor as well.
Specific, Brian, what specific areas are getting veiny? Just kidding.
Areas I don't train, right? But anyway, I just thought that was interesting, just as like, because Nunez and I brought it up, and like, he's in the same boat that we all are, where we're just trying to like see minuscule little bits of progress here and there along the way, and when you can see something like a new vein at a different or higher body weight than you were, I think that's at least something to be like, maybe there's something happening, like at least I'm gonna pretend there is, because optimism is important.
Yeah, well, Abel, you and I mean, this was with Steve Hall 3 years ago at this point, like one of the first podcasts. And I said, even back then, the desire to like use performance enhancing drugs, honestly, sure, like you want to get bigger and stronger, but half of it would almost be to have that excitement back, that like to see something happening again, and to have like a new variable to play with and to like just be excited to go into the gym. Because that's genuinely like the hardest thing I struggle with right now is like half of my workouts. I'm like, all right, here, just not going through the motions. Like I'm not trying, but like, I just know like it's going to be the same again. And like, you get a increased rep, once in a blue moon. It's just harder to stay as motivated,
One of the things that I do with my training a lot is try to create small wins every session. So like, even if it's not gonna, because you said, you can just sit there. Actually, this goes into what Abel wanted. One of the things Abel wanted to talk about the idea, the philosophical approach to progressive overload, or the more like kind of tangible approach. So like in my training, I really like the idea of just doing something more, because it makes me feel like I accomplished something and got like a small win for the day. And so that could be as simple as adding, a half a pound or a 1 pound micro plate to something, a fractional loading. But it can also be like, for me, as I've discussed with you guys, I have a whole lot of love for doing like partials and reverse drop sets and some of these like more lengthened overloaded techniques. But just the idea of like doing 2 partials when I did no partials last week, like maybe last week it was 0 RIR. And then the next time it was 2 RIR, or it was rather 2 partials after 0 RIR. And so even if that wasn't necessarily progressive overload in the sense that I did an extra full rep, it's like I did more than I did the last time. And that makes me feel accomplished in some way.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's actually something I've been thinking about when I was listening to the podcast of Eric and Dave. Is you guys touched on how some people just grow in these big spurts, so like nothing is really happening, then a big spurt, and like you have a couple of those. And I actually think so. I think Eric said that it was like small spurs, but it was like relatively linear and very slow after that first initial big spurt that he had when he was just starting out, if I remember correctly. And I think actually I'm that kind of spurty guy. So, and I was just thinking now before the call, I think I had like 3 that I can think of. Like I had one maybe in my first or second year of training, maybe, where I did my first kind of unintentional bulk. I just stopped giving a shit about being lean for a while, and then I got a bit heavy. And then when I cut down, it was like a noticeable. And I also like tried higher frequency for the first time. And then I went from being stuck at like 82.5 kilos for like 5 or 6 reps to like, I don't know, like I benched 100 kilos for 4 reps, but that was kind of a freak thing. So that was one there. And then in 2017, I actually gained 5 kilos. Big part of it was just that I basically started training legs. So, like take that for what it is, but still
2017. Is that what you said?
Yeah. No, I mean, but I did train legs before that. It's just like not nearly with the same dedication as upper body, and still not to this day, but at least it's in the same ballpark. But I will even put up pictures here so you can see 2016 physique, 2017 physique is a big difference. And then I would say I had another one like 2 years ago, maybe, where it's like, okay, like if you compare the physiques before that, like there is definitely a change. And in between, like it's like basically nothing. Like now, like if I look at my last year's pictures and now, it's basically identical. So, what would you guys say? Like, which one was it for you?
Just to real quick touch back on what Brian said with like the small wins, like, in principle, like I definitely agree. It's good. And obviously if you could add a half a pound microplate or whatever, that would be fantastic, right? If you add that up over time. I think honestly, this is one of the reasons that I've more come around to, and this is also one of the nice things training with Steve, is it's like, what, even if it didn't result in any progress, assuming that I didn't get worse, then it at least showed that like you can train at a 3 or a 2 RIR and it was okay, at least with that amount of volume I was doing. And more importantly for me, you could do these exercises, because it's one thing to go in there and say, like, from a difficulty standpoint, it's like, okay, I'm going to have to like bench, barbell overhead press, like pull-ups, like all these really harder exercises all the time. But when maybe I'm feeling off that day or something, and I can just do some machines. And also, even though I know that if I'm, I've said so many times that when you add a new exercise, you get that initial neural adaptation. Even though I know that's what's happening, it's still more fun than to go in and do the same exercise I've done my entire life and hit the same thing, right? Barbell bench press, 225 for 14, 225 for 14, 225, just doing that every single week versus, okay, I'm doing a hammer strength incline bench and I go up 1 rep and then I go up 1 rep and then I go up 5 pounds. Like, I know that it's not really putting on muscle, but at least I'm chasing after something and something's happening. And it's a small thing, but it definitely makes it more fun. And I would probably continue to just rotate through exercises like that in the future, even knowing that it's not actually doing anything.
One interesting, just quick comment on that is that you mentioned how there's like productive training at all these like lower RIRs and with these like less fatiguing movements and stuff like that. I wonder how much of that is relevant to the fact that you were training 5 times a week with,
right,
higher volumes versus with 3 times a week, needing to be closer to failure, working harder, bigger movements, et cetera, et cetera.
That was something I wanted to ask Eric too. I didn't, we say like, oh, well, we found that like it's equivalent to do 3 RIR or whatever. But then I think there's other research showing, like he even points out that a lot of these studies are relatively low volume or frequency compared to like what a lot of bodybuilders do. And maybe, but in that case, you could argue it's even more important to stay away from failure with truly higher volume. So yeah, it gets a little bit tricky, but the intuition would be that at lower volumes, it's more important to train at high intensities.
Yeah. I think his statement that I've heard him say recently, I think on Iron Culture, was that the majority of the studies that show benefit in or leaning towards benefit of being closer to failure are these like 2 to 3 times a week studies in RCTs, et cetera. And if you actually took a bodybuilder, I think that would be his stance would be that if you were doing 5 or 6 times a week training, it would be even more important that you're leaving more reps in reserve. And there would then again be more benefit to doing that too. So no, I fully relate with that. Do you want to touch on your progression rates real quick that Dave was talking about, and then I'll jump in? Dave, or I can do it first. That's fine.
I was just lost in the sea of cables here.
Well, I don't know if we answered your question.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Do you want to go first, and I'll jump in?
Oh, yeah. For me to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I think I've absolutely been more spurty. And part of that, though, is so when I started, let's again use 14 as like the real training started. From 14 to 16, I went from like 130 to 160. And then that was my sophomore year of high school. And then I really didn't progress almost at all my junior and senior year, which seems kind of crazy. Like, how do you not progress as like a 17, 18-year-old male? But I think I was still trying to be, I wasn't even that lean, honestly. I think I was like slow to eventually grow, but I was also on Accutane. And Accutane like messed me up. Like I think there are some studies showing that it correlates with some GI issues that may be part of why I developed it later. It made my joints incredibly dry. Like literally, like I would sit or stand in one position while brushing my teeth. And by the time I was done, like I would move out of that position and I felt like I was creaking, like it was painful. I couldn't squat. I couldn't deadlift. It was just a mess. So that could definitely have been part of it. And then my freshman and sophomore years of college, I gained 7 and then 8 pounds respectively, meaning like net 7 to 8 pounds at the same leanness. So that was huge. Then I didn't really grow my junior, senior year. And then my first 2 years of dental school, I again had like another spurt of like 10 pounds over those 2 years. And then that's more or less like the last time I've seen like noticeable, when I was like 26, 27, that's like the last time I've really seen noticeable gains. So yeah, I was very spurty, as Abel puts it.
Brian?
Yeah, I feel like mine was maybe a little less spurty with it concentrated in like 1 or 2 areas. Maybe that's spurty. I don't know. Well, I'll just go over the story. So basically, I started training at 5'2". My height was 5'2". Right. And so I was like 135 pounds. And so I don't even think I can count this as like tangible progress because I graduated high school at 5'10" and 170 pounds. I'd been training 3 years, but I didn't gain 35 pounds of muscle in 3 years, right? I gained 8 inches of height and a whole bunch of body size. But then I think the majority of the gains happened in college because in college, my first year, I went from 170 to 200, like literally the freshman 30. And it was a mix of fat and muscle in that 200. And I never really cut down ever. I just spent the next 3 years of college basically staying at 200. And it just kind of gradually became a better version of 200. And then in the senior year of college before spring break, I cut down for like the first time down to 185. And I've showed you guys this pic before. It's part of one of the transformation things I have on my profile, but it's like a picture of me cold as shit outside a hot tub in the snow. I can send it to you again at some point, but basically I think I was about what?
We will cut it in.
Yeah. I think I was like 185 pounds. And I think we estimated, something like 15% body fat at that point. And that was at the end of college. And now like we're talking, man, it's been like 15 years since then, and 185 and 9% body fat, something like that. So maybe I'm like 5 or 6% body fat better at the same weight. So what's that, like 12 pounds of muscle or something like that in 15 years. And it wouldn't surprise me if a decent amount of that, not a whole lot, but 3, 4, 5 pounds of that came since I stopped CrossFit in like 2017 and actually became a little more focused on doing things a little bit more optimally. So I would say the college years for sure had the biggest impact. And then it was like super gradual after that.
Mm. Yeah. So, I mean, there might be some hope for, the spurty ones amongst you, that like there are
Right.
still some unexpected stuff to come. Just one thing, like, because Dave, before he got on the call with Eric, like he asked me if if we want him to ask some questions of him, and then Brian wanted the long muscle length stuff, and I was bringing up the thing that I've been just talking about constantly, so I'll just like very briefly bring mine up. There's one specific question that I'm wondering about, especially like I thought about it yesterday again when listening to Dave and Eric. So if progressive overload is basically more of a consequence of muscle growth than the other way around, then first of all, if someone is stuck, so like there is a guy, like let's say for example me now, like I'm stuck on a chest press machine exercise, like whatever, like 120 kilos for 5 or 6. Like on good days I've been getting 6, on not so good days I've been getting 5. If I'm stuck there, so it's like clearly a 0 RIR, like I just cannot go past that for the life of me, then is this a problem now, or I'm getting all the stimulus I need from that? Because I mean, it's clearly very hard. In fact, I'm not only now, for the next 5 months, this is going to be a perfectly enough like stimulus for my pecs, at least on that one set. So it's not a problem that I'm stuck, or I need to do everything in my power to break through this because I need to present that, progressive overload. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
So, well, do you want to go first, Brian? Or?
Nah, go for it, man.
All
You're
right.
good.
So basically it comes down to like the whole, is it, because I remember in the voice message, I kind of like said to you, I was like, do people think that you can gain without progressively overloaded? But you're saying essentially like which one causes it, right? It's the progressive overload that causes the muscle growth and vice versa.
Yeah. I mean, so this would be like, if we take that at face value, that like progressive overload is a consequence of muscle growth and not the other way around.
Yeah. So it's funny. One of the comments in my Steve Hall video, and somebody said, well, like regarding the calf thing, and they're like, well, did your calves get stronger? Because if not, then we really can't say that like they don't respond. And I was like, yeah, they didn't get stronger because they didn't respond. Like that's the whole thing. Like because calves are not like a technical movement, right? So like sure, and even then, even with calves being like one of the least technical things you could do, right? I mean, it's literally that.
Yeah.
Even then, if I do a new machine, I will progress at that machine. But my like baseline that I've done since high school really is just like a one leg standing calf raise on the stair. And that has not increased in forever. And it hasn't increased because I don't have more cross sectional area of my muscle tissue to generate more force to increase the strength there. So I think they do go super hand in hand though. So it's not like I don't try, but I guess the question then would be, if it requires progressive overload, what does that look like? Do you mean literally like just trying to add more weight to the bar is simply then what does it? Because all of these other methods, I mean, I don't know almost anybody who advocates things that don't involve progressive overload in some way, right? So it's hard to parse it out.
It's like, I think in your example, Abel, it's like progressive overload would occur if that 225 was getting easier. But if that 225 never gets easier and it's always a 0 or a 1 RIR at 5 or 6 reps or whatever, then progressive overload has not occurred. And so then at that point, like, I think the argument would be, no, you're not making progress. You're not gaining muscle. Like, yes, you're within the proximity of failure that you need to be. You're doing enough volume for you to grow muscle, but there's probably something outside of the gym or some other factor that's keeping the adaptation from occurring. Because whether you're adding weight to the bar and forcing that progression or not, eventually you're going to reach a sticking point if other things aren't in order, right?
Yeah.
And I think a good or an interesting way to think about it, and this is kind of what Abel said, I'm just rephrasing it a little bit, is like if you think back to, and it's hard to know because strength gains at this level are so slow, but let's even just take like an intermediate lifter. It's not that hard to imagine an intermediate lifter, let's say doing 185 for 10 on bench, and then they go through months of progression and whatever, and then they get 185 for like 13, right? If that same intermediate lifter kept like started at 185 for 10, and then they did 185 for 10, and then they did 185 for 10 again, like to Brian's point, it should get easier. I suppose it could be. It just, again, intuitively, it's hard to imagine that by just continuing to do 185 for 10 every session, it's going to go from a 0 RAR to a 1 RAR to a 2 RAR, and then eventually to a 3. I mean, again, I guess in theory, I don't know anybody who's like tried that, but I just don't imagine it would get so much easier where like, wow, I've been doing the same thing for like 3 months or 4 months, and now I could do it for another 3 if I just tried. Whereas we could all imagine somebody going from that strength progression of 10 to 13.
Yeah. Although to play devil's advocate there, like, so again, this is where RPE can be useful to use, because like you do know the difference between, so it's a 0 RIR. So like you definitely cannot get another rep, but you can still feel if it was easier than last time. Like maybe last time it was an all out grinder. And now it was like, okay, it was like very tough. And I definitely cannot get a full like new rep after this, but it was not as big of a grinder. It was slow, but like I got it pretty solidly. So like that sort of progression does happen. But to be completely fair, like I don't, because I never really trained for extended periods, at least with with RIR, basically, like over 0. At the very least, like, technical 0 RIR. So once I couldn't get the same form, then I would stop. So I don't really have any experience even like testing that. So it, like the way it worked for me was I got as many reps as I could, and then I would go heavier proactively, and then I would try to build up the reps. But I don't know, like I cannot reflect to a time where it was like, okay, it was easier. Okay, it's easier still. Ooh, now it's very easy. Okay, now I will go heavier. So,
right.
So usually it would be like, okay, 100 kilos, 8 reps, 102 kilos, 7 reps. Okay, next time maybe 8 reps. And eventually when I'm like considerably stronger, then I would go back to 100 kilos. And then at 8 reps, I would feel like, oh, wow, like I have reps left in the tank. Okay, let's do a few more. So
I think it would happen at a beginner level though. Like if you got a beginner to work up from like, let's say they start at like, I don't know, 80 pounds for 10, they worked up to 100 pounds for 10, and then they just stayed at 100 pounds for 10. Like at that level, I could certainly see them continue to get stronger with 100 pounds. I mean, even I think it's Mark Ripto, or was it the HST guy who talked about how you really continue to adapt to the same weight and reps for like 3 or 4 weeks, technically. Now, again, at that level, right? So I could see it happening, and then also there's something to be said, we talk about like, oh, you're recruiting maximum muscle fiber as long as like you're trying to push it as hard as possible. So if they were still like doing that, in my example, 185 for 10 as fast as possible, like I could see it. Like, again, it's one of those things like nobody does this really. So it's hard to parse it out, but I still would be inclined towards having somebody try to progress whenever they can.
Yeah, I'm wondering if, so on your conversation yesterday about whether, you could achieve the same physique, or Eric could have achieved the same physique if he never went past the 3 RIR. And again, like, let's just assume that the gauging what a 3 RIR is not a problem. So I wonder if that's actually even possible. And because I'm wondering if there is something with your nervous system that just like when you go heavier, it inherently, for the same amount of reps, like it reduces your RIR, because like we talk about new exercises necessitate going through that neural adaptation. But I wonder if to some extent the same thing is going on with heavier weights. I mean, I mean, we know it does, right? Like lifting, 90% of your 1RM is very different than lifting 70% of it. But even at, smaller increments, like when you go 2.5 kilos heavier, like you kind of have to get used to lifting that weight first. So there's a bit of a learning phase. So inherently, like what was 3 RIR last week, even if you got all the like muscular adaptations, it will still feel heavier at least, and probably like you won't actually be able to get as many reps after that if you tried with the same form at least. So I'm wondering if it was actually even possible to do an experiment like that for someone.
Right.
Any input on that from anyone? Or you just agree?
No, I mean, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I know guys personally that never trained to failure and have way better physiques than me. And I know that means nothing, because he could have just have way better genetics than me. And like, that's just what it is. But I watched this dude squat like, 365 for 12, and he just racked the bar because he said it got hard, and bench, 275 for 8. And he just like, there's a slow rep and he's like, done, and that's just how he trained all the time. And I don't know if he ever really went to failure. He just always trained that way, and he was just really strong and had a great physique. So, I don't know. But one thing I was thinking about as you were talking about this whole thing and progressive overload in general is, the old linear periodization model is just really good for this type of thing, where you have like a week of 12s, a week of 10s, a week of 8s, and a week of 6s or something like that. Because then it's almost as if like you get to add weight to the bar because the reps are dropping, and you have like a 4 or 5 week turnaround period before you get back to like sets of 12, where there's a whole lot of adaptations that could have occurred. And then you get like a real sense of whether those sets of 12 are easier or heavier than they were 5 weeks prior.
Right. Yeah. Actually, since you mentioned that, I wanted to mention this earlier. What you mentioned about rotating exercises, like Dave, I think you said that it's fun because like, even though that there is neural adaptations that you're going through now, and that's why you're getting stronger so fast, like it's still psychologically it's still nice. Yeah. And I'm wondering, especially for advanced lifters, like how viable that would be to actually do that. And then when you return so let's say you have like for the chest, let's say you have like 3 exercises that you're like rotating through and kind of like program hopping with. So you have like, let's say barbell bench, then dumbbell bench, and then like some kind of a machine. And then so when you go through like one cycle like this and you go back to the barbell bench, if you're stronger, then kind of that's what you use as a gauge of whether you progress. Because like that's actually a testing method that people use anyway sometimes, that okay, like now I'm not neurally as efficient with this movement. Am I still stronger than I was the last time? Because if yes, then holy shit, then something really must have happened. I wonder how viable that would be.
Well, I think you'd have to give it time to become neurologically adapted again, right? I mean, I don't know how long that could take. Like I just did barbell bench press for the first time in like 8 months, and what I get 225 for 9. So like that's weaker than I used to do for sure. So, but it's the first time I've done it in a long time. So like if I could work out back to, I mean, my PR was 16. So I don't know. I mean, that's still a lot. It's a lot of ground to make up. But sure, if I got to like 17, then I'd be like, wow, like I probably have put on something. But I think at least a month, if not 2. Because I remember Jeff Alberts talking about like, this principle, and him and Brad Loomis were talking about it. He's like, yeah, a barbell curl doesn't take many time to get adapted to. Like if I can't, fully efficiently barbell curl after 30 years, like I don't know what I'm doing. And I told him I actually disagreed with that, because in my cut 2020, and it was probably my most successful cut, but when I dieted, I actually gained strength on my barbell curl the majority of that time. And I obviously was not gaining bicep size, but I hadn't done a barbell curl because this was during the lockdowns. So I had to work out in like my parents' basement, essentially, where all my like stuff from high school is. And I hadn't used that in so long. So I still was adapting to a barbell curl. And I mentioned before with the calf machines, like literally while Steve and I were doing, like I had one home workout and I was doing the 1 leg calf raise on the stairs that I've done for over a decade. and it would not budge. And then I was doing a machine calf raise within the same week that was progressing. So even something that seems so basic, I still think there's an adaptation period.
Yeah, the barbell curl thing, I agree with 100% too. I remember when you had that conversation with Brad and Jeff about that. I think you even showed them like a video of you approaching failure or something like that. But no, I had a cycle where I hadn't done barbell curls for almost a year, and I put them in, and it was like 95 for 10 was failure. Like I could not have done another rep. And then like 5 weeks later, I was doing 115 for 9, and it was like the same thing. So you're kind of just like, I didn't gain 20 pounds of bicep strength.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Man, when you think of like some of the weights we used to lift, I don't know if it's the same with you, Abel. I know I don't know if you had like the heavy barbell lifting days as much as like Brian and I did, but
like, yeah, I was a little bit.
Yeah. Like I was curling 135 for 6 at the end of a workout, like after rows, after pull-ups. And again, obviously form was not at all pristine, but I'm like, even with crappy form, I don't even think I can do that for one right now. And same thing with my shoulder presses. Like I have a video where I'm clearly smaller and I'm kicking up the 100-pound 100-pound dumbbells for shoulder press for 10 reps. And again, I'm probably coming like to here. I'm not going all the way down, but I'm here 10 reps at more or less the same tempo. And if I try to kick up hundreds right now,
dude, they're hard to kick up even for bench press.
yeah. So it's just funny what you get used to doing.
Yeah, it's quite shocking, honestly. Like to me on RDLs and chin-ups specifically. So like I've been doing chin-ups have been maybe the movement that I've been doing for the longest and the most consistently. So I've been doing that since like 2013, basically at least like once a week, and oftentimes more like twice a week for the most part. But this like last like maybe 7 months, I barely did chin-ups because I was like getting into more of the CAS pull down variations, and I just enjoyed experimenting with it. But now I started doing it like just here and there again, and it's I assumed that I would lose, or at the very least not improve on it, because I'm just not doing it regularly. But how much I regress was actually quite surprising. Like I was considerably like way stronger before, and then RDLs as well. Like holy shit! So like I checked my log. Like I did 145 kilos or something for like 11 reps, or actually 13 reps. Yeah, and like I was pretty happy with that. Like I almost passed out at the end, and now like holy shit, I cannot even do it for 5. Like it's a really big difference. But I was doing RDLs like twice a week basically for a long time, and now I rarely do it. So
yeah, the neurological adaptation is huge. I mean, any big compound movement, you notice that. I noticed the same with pull-ups, chin-ups, whatever as well, because I used to do them constantly, multiple times a week, like pre-CrossFit, during CrossFit, post-CrossFit. And then again, like you in the last couple of years, I've kind of veered away from them, but I'll throw them in occasionally. And I can still do like what I consider to be somewhat respectable numbers, but they're certainly lower than what I was using when I was doing them consistently.
Do you find, because like I had a hard time giving up. Again, it was nice with Steve. It kind of like forced me to finally give some of them up. But like my pull-ups, I'm back to doing them. I'm only doing them once a week, whereas before I was doing them twice a week. But I'm still not lifting as much as I was after, let's see, it's been 6 weeks, I think, since we've finished. It's been a while, and my pull-ups are still not back to where they were pre-Steve. So again, it shows it can take a while. And I don't know, maybe I'd have to get back to twice a week for it to ever get back to that, So, but you eventually get to a point that it took so much to get to that. It's almost like when you compete for like if you were a power lifter and your whole life was powerlifting for years and years, like not only are you rarely at that peak, like if you stop exercising, but even if you were doing that exercise the whole time, they peak for a specific meet. But like, let's say you're like, oh, my best ever was 500, doesn't matter the lift. The majority of the year, they can't even hit that, even while still doing those exercises, right? It's so peaked that, it's almost like if you were to stop powerlifting, I could see somebody just being like, well, I'm just not going to do the big 3 anymore because I'm not even going to be close to what I was, you know what I mean? Assuming again, you've dropped the idea that you're going to compete anymore. And that's kind of something that's happening with me a little bit with some of these lifts.
Do you think that there's like a subconscious change in the way that you execute things? Like maybe Steve got into your brain a little bit over these last 6 months and like you're a little less like herky jerky and a little less explosive momentum based or anything like that?
I don't, because I think that it's a misconception that I was like that. Like I said, Steve was actually like, again, you guys see some of the videos I send you, like there was the row example but in general, yes, if I'm posting like a max lift, then you'll see these like all out kind of movements. But the vast majority of my movements are a slower and controlled. And also, especially with the pull-ups as my example, I do them from home and it's like in the doorway, with like the crappy setup. So I'm trying to make it as hard as I can. I don't use, that's just my body weight. So I've since day one gone very slow. I pause and I'll get like 15 reps. So like relative, like my PR for body weight is 30. So, and that is a herky jerky pull up.
But so you did a video where
30,
you did 45 pounds for 16 or something like that.
15,
Is that right?
Yeah,
15.
Mm-hmm.
So what, like, that was kind of like a little bit of the herky jerkiness, right? So
Absolutely.
what if you just did 45 pounds, like super strict, like pausing at the stretch position, keeping like, if your goal is to keep a big chest, keeping a big chest type thing, like, what do you think you'd end up with there?
So I do that actually. So when I was doing like the most of my pull-ups, my first set would be all out. So that's when I got like my 100 for 6 or 135 for 3. And then I follow that up with 2 back off sets with 45 pounds, again, strict, slow. And I do 2 sets of 8 to 9.
Yeah.
So fresh,
11,
10,
something like
10,
that.
11, something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was just speculating here. Cause like with 20 kilos, I'm pretty sure if I do it strict, then probably I can do like now I would be able to do 8. And if I practice it, probably I could do 10. And Dave is like way stronger than me on pull-ups. So probably, although sometimes, people are surprisingly good or bad at high reps or low reps, but it seems like you have pretty good work capacity as well. So at the very least 12, I would think. Still,
if I was fresh, yeah.
And Abel, you do them with like the angles grips, right? You don't usually go straight pronated.
So straight pronated, I never. So pull-ups. Are we talking pull-ups or chin-ups in this whole thing?
Well, chin-ups would be supinated, pull-ups would be pronated, and then the handles would be rotational, I guess, right?
So pull-ups I really haven't done in a long time, but pull-ups I do with I really don't like. So if I'm gonna use a fixed bar, then neutral is the only one I'm comfortable using. The other ones are just gonna fuck up my elbows. So
I agree.
Or so pronated can be fine, but then with like a loose grip, so almost like kind of just holding like this, not with a full strong grip, which is obviously not very good for heavy loading. But by the way, I need to overhaul my entire thing I just said. So if we're talking pull-ups, then with 20 kilos, I could probably do like 6, 7 at best.
Pronated's definitely harder. I mean, I'm a neutral grip or rotational grip guy too. Like I don't supinate or pronate fully on any of them because they just don't feel good. But if I have rotational handers or neutral, that's kind of the way I speak about them usually.
Again, the wide grip, right? Because like the biceps are a lot like not leveraged as well to be involved. So they cannot help you as much. By the way, Dave, you need to bounce like in the second, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you guys want to just continue on, I can just bounce out. That's fine.
Yeah. I mean, Brian, we can shoot a few words.
We can keep talking for a few.
The lengthened stuff.
Yep. All right, guys. I will see you next time.
All right, brother. Good talking.
You, man. Yeah, man. So, on the what do you think of the stuff that I said yesterday about the lengthened partials? That I've really been thinking about like putting some kind of a stopper on the cable stack so that like when I'm here, like it like bumps into something on the.
But then like what happens when you fatigue more? Because eventually the partials over the course of partials are going to become smaller and smaller, right? So that might be like a stopping point for like my first partial or something, but then you're going to have more fatigue and you'll get 10% less range of motion.
Yeah, I guess ideally, actually, that I've also thought of that it would be like multiple stoppers, so and it wouldn't bump into it, but it would like go through it, right? So it would be just something to make a noise, basically, so that I know when I hit that level. So the only problem, I mean, there are multiple problems. One is that if you like, that would only work if your posture is exactly the same throughout, right? Because like if you
compensator,
or like on a chest supported stuff, it would be okay. But if you're doing just a regular pull down, then, you know, like if you lean back more or something, then it will bump into those at a different point. So, and that's the only thing that really bothers me with the partials, that it's just because it's not standardizable. It's almost like I just see them as a bonus. Like I sometimes do them, sometimes I just cannot bother. I'm like, oh fuck, like I'm done with this set. Like let's just end it here. So
yeah, I just I don't think it bothers me at all. And I had a Jordan Lips. I was on his podcast, and he asked me the same thing about kind of standardizing the partials or whatever. But it doesn't bother me because I just use them as a means of creating that small win for myself, doing more than I did the last time. And so like in my progression of short overload movements, it'll usually go like 2 RIR, 1 RIR, 0 RIR, like then week 3. And then week 4, it's like 0 RIR plus, 2 or 3 partials. And then week 5 might be 0 RIR plus 5 partials or something. And then after that, it might be week 6 is like 0 RIR plus a reverse drop set. So no partials, you just add weight and then do partials, right? So for me, it's like, man, it's just at this point in my training career where it's so hard to see tangible like rep and weight progress, that creating those small wins of just this idea of like doing more, like I'm adding volume in some way, I'm creating more stimulus here. Like I'm going to pull that partial as hard as I fucking can every time, within the constraints of not exploding and using other muscle groups to accomplish the task. And so it's like, it just doesn't matter to me. Like, as long as I'm getting more than no range of motion, like, the first partial might get 90%, then 80%, then 65%, then 50. And like, as long as the range of motion is enough that I feel the muscle still contracting that I'm trying to target, then that's enough for me, to feel like I'm accomplishing something.
Yeah. It's, but so like one thing that I'm really happy with over these past months of experimenting with these pull down variations is that I think now I actually know where my freaking lats are, like during the movement. Like honestly, like when I was doing this on a chin up, I felt like, okay, like my lats are like maximally stretched out. And I can definitely feel the difference between that and like this. Now I really feel it here. And actually that's a good tip for people that I thought about this before, but now I just got reminded of this is, if you're not sure what the proper movement is to like hit something in the lengthened position, just look up some like physio videos or like rehab videos on how to stretch something. And they will show it. Like if you look up lat stretch, you will see things like
across
this.
The body. Yeah. You adduct the arm across the body. Yep.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. One thing though is, I don't know if you experimented with like the angles, like how much across, because there definitely comes a point where like you can feel it a lot more in your rear delts when you're doing the movement.
For sure. Well, I think that it's like the soft stop is the word, the phrasing that I believe is proper here, is like when you reach the arm across the body, there's a soft stop, and then you could keep going. But once you hit that soft spot, the soft stop, that's kind of the point, I think, where you're going to get the maximal stretch of that muscle. Because essentially what you're doing by adducting the arm across the body is you're finding the short position of your pec, right? So you can get the pec even shorter, but by getting the pec shorter, I don't know that that's necessarily lengthening the lat more. Because like if you're doing a press around, which would be the antagonist movement, you can get the pec super short, but that isn't necessarily stretching the lat more than it would if you just went to that soft stop point, because then you would have that resistance pulling you. So the resistance is pulling you in that angle, in that direction. So you don't need to actually go to that like complete stopping point. I guess it's like the same as if you were doing a a bench press. And, they talk about how you don't want to completely bottom out where there's like no resistance there. You want to at least be able to have like a little bit of give at the bottom. So I think the same thing could apply to that too.
Yeah. Yeah. It would be really cool. Like I've been thinking a lot about how to best do this kind of pull around motion. It's like one solution is definitely like holding yourself, like pushing yourself away with your arm from like a bench and then doing it that way. Like these things just bother me because of the standardization stuff, which might not be as important as I'm making it out to be. Cause like, because I mean, actually maybe it's better because this way you can customize it more over time and like really find what the best setup is. But yeah, like I was even thinking of like putting a foam, so like the bench and a foam roller, so I can like sort of, it looks
reach around it almost. That's interesting. Yeah. No, there's certainly like a few good ways to set it up. The arm bracing one is probably the easiest to set up because you can brace against anything. Like you've seen me brace against like the arm of my functional trainer and just reach across with the other arm like that. The bench works really well too. The foam roller is an interesting idea. What I struggle with sometimes is the balance of shifting in the hips and the torso, because like sometimes I feel like I just want to shift my hips and then reach across my body, but then the torso inevitably is going to rotate as well as the load is kind of like pulling you that way. So there's like a balance between how much of each rotates,
Yeah. That's the thing. And like sometimes I don't know, it just looks like, man, like, am I gonna mess up my back by doing this? Like, because like you're leaning a bit to the side, right? And then also like a bit away from like, so you twist and rotate.
Yeah.
So like,
there's certainly some obliques in there as well. Like you can kind of feel the obliques working a little bit through some of that as well.
Yeah. Cool. Like just one last thing I want to bring up, or I mean, do you need to bounce as well? Like in the next
minute? I probably have 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay, cool. Then, I mean, we don't need to fill that whole thing. I just wanted to bring up something that I actually wanted to mention at the beginning of this whole thing, but because Dave had to go early, I was kind of skipped over it. But so we talked about, so this is just a funny thing, the Steve Hall, Dave podcast. So this is like, honestly, one thing that just fascinates me in fitness, like the differences between people in appetite. So this is completely unrelated to everything we've been talking about so far, but like when Steve was saying that he is like bulking up to 200 pounds for him was this nightmare experience because he felt nauseous all the time. And if he missed a meal, then his whole day was screwed because there was no way he was going to make up for that. And the amount of calories we're talking about here is 4,000. And like, to me, that's mind-boggling, honestly. Like, I don't know, like when I got up to 90 kilos this winter, and it was heavier than I intended to, honestly. Like, actually it was a bit more, maybe like 92, something like that. But like, it was heavier than I intended to. And honestly, a lot of it was just like kind of passively eating a bit too much. And I rarely eat like pure high calorie, hyper palatable junk. Like we're talking about things like potatoes and things like that. If I'm not going out, if I go out, then like, probably it's like 6,000 or something easily. If I'm like eating liberally and then I'm not making up for it at home. So like, I was thinking of like, where would be that point for me where I would feel like nauseous all the time? And probably at that 6,000 mark, I would think. But what do you think? What about you?
Yeah, when we were talking about this, I got a good laugh out of it too, because both of us kind of were like, oh, 4,000 calories. Like, oh my God, that's so low, you know? But the thing being, I think it's cumulative. And I don't know that like 6,000 is a really high number when you think cumulative. Like you're talking like every single day I have to eat 6,000 calories, like a week later, then 2 weeks later, now 3 weeks later. And oh my God, 6,000 calories. Like,
yeah,
I feel like that would become burdensome on a one day, like just go for it type thing, or a couple times a week. I feel like 6,000 is reasonable within reach, you know, and you wouldn't feel awful about it.
Yeah.
I do wonder how much like subconscious compensation would occur in subsequent days though if you didn't like keep your foot on the pedal. Because I know for me, man, if I have a big day of eating where I'm at parties and I'm having cheesesteaks and pizza and desserts and stuff like that or whatever it is, and I have 6,000 calories, the next 2 days I might eat like 2,200 because I'm just not that hungry and I can't be bothered to eat type thing. I also think like you said, the food quality was high, which is a big factor because I think I could eat 6,000 calories or even average 4,000 calories. I think I could average 4,000 calories for years with no problem if I was able to have some of these more palatable foods. But when you talk about being a little bit more rigid with diet foods, but just eating more of them, that's a challenge, man. Like I'm now 185 pounds. I've been dieting for 9 weeks. And if I try to eat the 2,600 calories that I'm shooting for every day in just meat, veggies, and quality starches, there usually reaches a point where I look at my food and I'm not even trying to finish all of it. And I'm at like 2,600 calories right now, but then flip that and be like, you can have bagels and we can order pizza tonight, or you can put loads of cheese on stuff. And like, before I know it, I'm at 4,500 calories and I didn't even think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I guess, so two things, like for me, the reason it would be easy, actually, a part of me really wants to conduct this sort of experiment. The only thing is that like I would gain weight really quick. So like that's a big difference. Like I would most probably get to a point where I would be nauseous of eating at least like relatively clean foods, like 6,000 a day. But I would not look like Steve Hall when that point came. Like when he felt nauseous and like, oh my God, this is terrible. Like he still looked like many people will at the end of their cuts. Like he looked lean, wasn't as lean as he normally is. So maybe like
15 to 17%.
Yeah, at most. So I would probably be closer to 30 when that would happen easily. And the reason I know that is because like so this is the second big issue is for me, when I will go up in weight, like that will not happen in like, okay, I have 4 square meals and those are counted and I sit down and eat them and finish them and then that's it. It's like when we are watching Netflix with my wife, that's when I will usually kind of have my dinner. And it will be like, just now I'm sort of cutting and I will have these big like bowls of like veggies, like fried zucchini and mushrooms and things like that. And now that's great for a cut. In the winter, that would have been like mainly potatoes. And like to me, potatoes are one of those like clean foods that if I fry them, no oil, just fry them, air fry them, and put some like ketchup or any kind of like low calorie sauce even on it, I can just freaking passively eat that like popcorn. Like, and it will be a long time until I will feel like, man, this is making me sick. It probably will be at the point where I just need to go to the toilet because like I just ate way too much of it.
Yeah.
So like, and then with things like oatmeal, which is like, I don't know, like 5 times the calories, it's even worse. Like I can just make these big like bowls of it. So I will put like out of 200, not 200, I don't know, like 100 grams of oatmeal and like enough water to make it like nice and soft and kind of fluffy. And man, I can passively eat so much of that. And when I've gotten my fattest, a good chunk of that was just from oatmeal, for example. So
I actually really like oatmeal too. I find starches to be pretty easy to consume as well. Like everything you listed was a starch. I feel like potatoes, the way you described, I do them similarly. And oatmeal, I also like raisins in oatmeal, which adds again more carbohydrate there. And then rice, I really like rice, like different types of rice pilaf, white rice, any kind of rice is good too. So I can eat starches all day long. For me, the hiccup ends up becoming the veggies and the protein. Like I can eat tons of protein when there's like a decent amount of fat in it. So maybe like a steak that's say 10 grams of fat to 25 grams of protein, I would consider that like moderate levels of fat. And I could eat that forever, like a lot of it. Same with like chicken thighs and stuff. But when you start going like chicken breast, or you start going like, top sirloin round steaks where it's like the same macros as a chicken breast, more or less. I find those things really hard to get down after like 5 or 6 ounces in a sitting.
Yeah. Although I have to say that chicken breast, like fried to a crispy level,
Yeah.
That to me is surprisingly, I wouldn't say it's like addictive, like, I don't know, like cheeses, for example.
Yeah.
But it's I could eat quite a lot of that. Again, it would be cool to run an experiment. Like, when would I start resenting eating the next piece?
Yeah. Was it do you air fry that as well?
Yeah, well, like I used to just microwave it before I had an air fryer.
So you microwave chicken breast.
Yeah. Oh man, like I'm a freaking peasant when it comes to this. Like I'm yeah,
like you cook it in the microwave, or is it pre-cooked and then you microwave it to reheat it?
No, like take raw chicken breast, like maybe poke it a few times with a fork if I'm really fancy. Cover it with another plate so that it's like not making a giant mess in the microwave, and leave it in for forgetting how many minutes now, but yeah, and it becomes basically the same as if it was in the air fryer, honestly.
That's insane. I just like imagine it becoming rubber. Like that's all I can picture in my brain right now. It's like rubber chicken.
No, honestly, like the microwave is a surprisingly functional cooking device. A lot, yeah, it doesn't get enough credit, but it's yeah, so like I think that I could but probably because of that, probably like at heart, I'm a fat kid, and slightly still like just slight eating disorder, if I really dig deep enough. So it's probably because of that, honestly, because so make no mistake, I don't feel good when I'm eating that much oatmeal that it makes me fat. Because I mean, how much oatmeal does that have to be? A lot. So like yeah, on the GI front, I don't feel great. But it's just it's not a pathological thing where I'm suffering, but I just so right. I don't look. I actually just like, yeah, fuck, like this kind of sucks, but it just doesn't bother me enough to stop this pleasurable activity for that. It's kind of like I don't know. I cannot come up with a good analogy, but it's like that. And it's not that surprising if I think about it, that for someone like Steve, it's nauseating to get to that point. Because like, if you think of girls that, that might be, like 100 pounds or less, like, yeah, if they eat like 2000 calories, which for us is like, a tough diet macro count, like they will feel sick eating 2000 calories a day, right? Like they will eat like a tiny bit of food and they're like, oh, I'm so full. I'm sick of this. So yeah, like different people, different appetite regulatory system, I guess, in their bodies. So
do you find when you're eating excessively like that and becoming a fat kid that you have like body temperature regulation issues while you're trying to sleep?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's, yeah, I freaking hate that. Even now during a cut, like if I like eating in the more in the evening, because socially and logistically it just works out well. But I freaking hate that it just makes me sweat like a pig in my sleep.
One of the things we've been talking about on my podcast last episode was how, since I've been dieting the last 9 weeks, like the subjective markers of health in my life have all improved. Like for whatever reason, I don't put too much reliance on what my Apple Watch tells me, but like my HRV is better than ever. My sleep quality has been better than ever. And subjectively, like I have more energy throughout the day. I like walk around and I have like this air of lightness under my feet. Like, oh my God, I'm only 185 pounds. I can move so rapidly, and like stairs don't tire me out, and like all these things. And so it's been nothing but positive so far. Since I've been dieting, which people think is just crazy because they're like, when you diet, you're supposed to have all these like down regulations and blah, blah, blah. And I think that ultimately it probably goes back to the fact that we all have like this settling range, and that you're just probably like going to experience some of these deleterious effects at the bottom of that range and at the top of that range. And then there's this whole like wide range in the middle where you're at your best. And maybe my best is like in the mid 180s or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably actually I'm right now. I'm at the low end of that settling range, and probably I just cannot freaking resist going under it because like summer, it's something just switches in my head. Like it's like a drug addict. Like just cannot control myself once I get here. But yeah, like if I think back to the winter now, it was actually awesome. Like it was such a fun winter because like I was just so indulgent, but still like reasonably like under control. And I got a little bit heavier than I would have wanted. And honestly, I think if I had to go back now, the only thing I would change is that I would just be a bit more diligent with the compensation strategies, which are really not like anything unhealthy. It's just eating moderate palatability, lower energy density stuff to satiety, basically for the day before and after maybe or something, or the 2 days after an indulgent like eating out event, and it takes care of the problem largely. If I was as indulgent as I was this winter, probably it wouldn't take care of it 100%, but probably I wouldn't have ended up at 92 kilos, but would have ended up at, let's say, 89 or something, which right. That would be handy now.
Yeah.
I would be done with this cut like 2 weeks ago. So
it makes the journey a lot easier going down when you have less distance to go.
Yeah. But that's the kind of thing that makes me want to not stay as lean year round. Because man, like then I wouldn't be able to do what I did this winter. And that was like, I want that every winter. Like I just decided that now.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, maybe so for me, like in past winters, I've gone a little bit ham, and it's, I've gotten up to over 200 pounds or right around 200 before I start my next cut. And it's because I just kind of went indulgent and just said, fuck it. It's the winter, like it doesn't matter type thing. And then this winter, the only thing I really did is institute kind of what you said, where after a day of an indulgence, I would have either like a day where I fasted until dinner, or something along those lines, where basically it would be like it was like a binge restrict cycle, but a little bit more planned, but it was like okay, I did the things that I wanted to do, that I have the freedom to do because it's the off season. I'm not going to feel bad about it. I just I'm going to not eat tomorrow until dinner time and have a 1,300 calorie dinner, and the whole thing offsets. You have a 5,000 calorie day and a 1,300 calorie day, and eventually you kind of end up at the same place. So it really wasn't even hard, like I was saying. Maybe it's lucky that I've been an athlete and have like a decent grasp on nutrition, but on the day following the really the overeating day, it's just I don't feel hungry the next day, so it's not like even that hard to resist a little bit.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I also did a lot of this fasting stuff now in the winter actually, and that definitely helps because like it can definitely like quickly push me into like acting like a full blown like eating disorder victim when I'm lean. But if you're like at a healthily fluffy body fat percentage, then like you can tolerate that much more easily. So
I agree 100%. Yeah, dude. It's like the opposite. Like the perfect example is 2 nights ago, we went out to dinner with my wife, and I had like steak and a big plate of French fries and like fried Brussels sprouts and, a piece of chocolate bread at the end. And I'm in the middle of my diet, so I obviously shouldn't have done that. And where usually if I would have done that in the off season, the next day I would wake up and be like, not hungry, I'm just fasting, I woke up starving the next day. Like I woke up so hungry. My body was like, oh, that's what we've been missing type thing, So there's certainly a different psychology when you're restricting versus when you're in the surplus.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I might. Yeah, I'll report in our group because I might do that after this. So see how much that makes me not hungry tomorrow. Anyways, man, I think we can wrap up here because I'm afraid that even my cloud is going to run out of space. But yeah, this was fun. And then maybe I will even pump it out today. Who knows? Why not?
Oh, all that editing, get it done, bro.
Yeah. So a ton of editing that needs to be done.
I'll try to send you a picture of that picture that I referenced of me.
Oh yeah.
Post college. I'll try to shoot that over to you here.
Awesome.
And you had a couple spots where you wanted to throw pictures in of yourself too.
That's very true.
Sweet.
Cool beans, man. Then thanks for being on.
Yeah, for sure, man. Talk soon.
Yep. Oh fuck.